Hello, good morning, and welcome everyone to our first EndeavHER event for 2022 team Back to Basics Women Advocacy in the Workplace. My name is Vera, and I'll be your MC for today. So, for those of you who are new to EndeavHER, we are the leading global community of, by, and for high impact entrepreneurs. EndeavHER's unique entrepreneur first model, peer to peer community, and trust based network provides a platform for founders to dream bigger, scale faster, and pay it forward to the next generation. Our EndeavHER initiative is an annual program to support, elevate, and help high impact female entrepreneurs, as well as a platform to amplify women's voices. This event is organized by the EndeavHER APAC offices Malaysia, Indonesia, Singapore, Philippines, Vietnam, and Japan, which is also powered by our partners International Labour Organization (ILO) and Female Entrepreneurs Worldwide. Today we have an amazing number of registrants, and I would like to thank you all who have expressed interest, especially our partners who have helped us spread the word about EndeavHER. If you have any questions for our speakers, feel free to drop it in the comment section in any of the platforms that you're watching live now. Without further ado, I would like to welcome our phenomenal panel of speakers: Angeline Tam, founder of Ankas; Sharmila Murad, Chief Investment Officer at Childhood Group; Svida, CEO at GCM Group and EndeavHER Indonesia's board; and moderating the session, Tan Shushan, Group Head of Institutional Banking at DBS Bank, discussing on women advocacy in the workplace. Ladies, the floor is yours.
Hello, good morning. My name is Sushan, and I'm the Group Head of Institutional Corporate Banking for DBS Bank and EndeavHER board member, EndeavHER Indonesia board member. So delighted and honored to be here with three amazing women, and let me introduce them in no particular order. Svida, and Svida is the CEO of GCM Group, multimedia content company, and a real paragon of women entrepreneurship. And I like to call her a media mogul. And a fun fact for Svida is that she's going to do 6 marathons before she hits 60. And she's already halfway there. So well done, Svida. Keep inspiring everyone. With her passion in media, Svida is also a big advocate for developing young, smaller labels in the Asian fashion industry, and a strong advocate for young women entrepreneurs. So welcome, Svida. Next, we have Angeline Tam, the founder of Ankas Philippines, which is a ride-hailing and delivery app for motorcycles. And some fun facts on Angeline is, professionally, she, was in the financial world like me, and a serial entrepreneur. She's launched several online businesses, joined a SoftBank affiliated fund, and now founded Ankas in 2016. And also, no stranger to motorbikes herself. She's an avid motorbike rider and also a gamer. She told me she's not a champion gamer, but I'm sure she is. So big Halo fan there. And last but not least, a big shout out to Sharmila Murad, who woke up really early this morning. Sharmila joins us from the UAE, Dubai. She's the CIO of Childhood Group, which is a retail distribution marketing company based in Dubai. And Sharmila has the most incredible background, an engineer, serves on many multiple international boards, lived all over the world, the US, Middle East, and spends a lot of time volunteering also as a mentor for EndeavHER globally, actually. So welcome, Sharmila, as well. So what I'm going to do is not hear from me. I'm going to pass the mic to Svida to kick us off, with her sort of her prism, what she thinks more can be done, maybe sharing some interesting stories as well. So each of my panelists will probably speak for about 3 to 5 minutes each, and then we'll come back into the discussion. So, Sveta, over to you.
Glad to be here this morning. And from my experience, I led a program of women entrepreneurship since 2008. What I realized is that there is a siphoning of working women. When they graduate, that's about 50-50. Everyone, men and women, are joining the workforce. But then as they reach middle career, that's when the major drop happening. So we need to look at it. Why? So the research that we did a few years back with McKinsey, a lot of it happened because that's at the at the middle stage of career is when they're facing with the kids problem, the kids growing up and have some issues that probably needs about a year to fix. But to go back to work is not easy because it's not like they can take sabbatical and then go back to the same position. If they're working in a state enterprise company, they sometimes have to go back from the beginning of zero stage. So it's not interested to, they're not it's not an interesting proposition to go back. And then second, that we found that there is like, to move up to be a branch manager, they need to experience other branch. So what happened if that big bank, for example, only have one bank in that city? She will never be a branch manager. So that study lead to mutation. Instead of moving to another branch and hence moving to another city, is mutation in the company, from the HR to the marketing to the treasurer, etc., so that that exposure would give her the room to move. And then what I have been advocating for, the flexi hours or even sharing job, now is happening because of the pandemic. We can see and realize that something like flexi hours or sharing job is not that bad. It's something that can be done. So yes, this journey of developing a career for women, understanding more of women and their journey in the career, have a lot of finding, needs a lot of studies, and of course male support in the company, and also husband also important. But we also are very fortunate in Asia. We have a lot of help, and we are still close with our family, many of us. So kids are actually can be outsourced easier than if it is in the West.
It takes a village, doesn't it, to raise a kid, Sveta?
Yes, yes. I work in the States in the beginning, and my kids were like 0 to 3 year old. And then when I came back, I just like, why did I work in the States with the kids? It's just so much easier with the helper, with the family. And what I found also, a good manager is actually a good mother too. So if you own your management, you will be a good manager at home too. So yeah, so maybe that's the beginning of opening for me. Thanks.
So it's interesting, Sveta, that you use the banking example, and certainly that would have been the case. But thank God today there's digitalization, and bank branches are actually shutting down.
Yeah.
And hopefully that's actually a good thing for women in their mid-career, as
Yes.
physical locations are no longer as important as one's ability. And so
Yes.
this work from home COVID acceleration has enabled us to be able to work from anywhere. So you could be working from home, hybrid working environment, and still hopefully do well.
Yeah.
Okay, let me pass the mic now to Angeline. Angeline, can you share a few ideas as a kickoff, please?
Yeah, sure. I guess I'd like to share a more personal experience with the topic, right? So I grew up in Singapore. I studied in New York for my university, and then I started out my career in banking, right? And from there, I eventually started my first company. I met my husband through the Singapore government, who's Filipino, and I ended up in the Philippines, right? I think through my journey, right, in doing ANTAS, we've actually overcome a lot of discrimination for the two-wheel industry and become advocates for this space. I think for me, what I've learned through that journey, after being shut down 3 times by the government, and I guess like even though we were doing something that was definitely very useful for a lot of people and doing it much better than everyone else, I've actually learned that one way to overcome discrimination and stigma that's very set and deeply into everybody's hearts and bones is really through education and awareness, right? And making sure that people have that opportunity to learn, be aware that they might have this bias, and help them understand that this bias is unfounded, right? So, for example, like a lot of people are afraid of motorcycle drivers because they would wear a mask, which wasn't cool then, which is cool now, right? And so they were like, oh, they're hiding their face, they're trying to like rob me, right? So, but in reality, as a rider myself, right, I wear that because it's hot, it's dusty, and I don't want to, I don't want to get dark, right? So I think these are the little kinds of misconceptions that that people have in their minds, right? But then as we came out with, we coined a new term like motorcycle taxi, right? And we made sure that our drivers were, good smelling, right? They were in clothes that were, like they didn't look shabby, right? There was
Right,
very
female founder, if you don't get the details right.
yes, right. You have to make sure they smell
Customer
good.
experience is everything.
Exactly. So, but I think with that, you slowly change people's mindsets. It doesn't happen overnight, right? And I think that's the way that we can also look at raising awareness, which is what we're doing here today, right? And also letting people know and see that there are strong women leaders out there that is something that you can model towards, right? Because I think I've been very fortunate that growing up in Singapore, even in the Philippines, I've had the opportunity to see a lot of strong women role models. Like even in my workplace, when I first started in JP Morgan, I think all of the top brass were all women actually. Sushan should know that, right? You were one of them. So that actually helps you. You don't even think about it actually, to be fair, right? Not to say that this doesn't exist in other countries or other industries, but I think that really helped me not to get to where I am today, to have these really strong role models. And I think that for us to help support women more, it's really to recognize, like what Frida was saying, right? Like why do women drop off midway, right? I think in Asia we're very fortunate to have a lot of support, right? Whether it's through our families or being able to have someone to help take care of our kids. And I think that's something that I learned when I became a mother myself. I became much more compassionate towards women who were mothers, because I realized how difficult it was. And I think that's something that we can go an extra mile to help other women, maybe through daycare or whatnot, right? In the positions that we're in, and also help men who don't understand this at all. Like they don't understand like how difficult it is to be a mom and to be working and to be taking care of the household at the same time, and to help them be more supportive.
Because like it or not, we still have that duty fall upon us, don't we?
Right. I mean, when push comes to shove, who's gonna take care of the kid? Usually, I have to say it's gonna be the mom, right? So I think these are the things that we need to recognize, and we need to try and have build some awareness and active steps towards how can we support each other more in this case. Yeah.
Great. Thank you, Angeline.
Thank you.
Shamila, over to you. Thank you so much for joining us so early.
Good morning, Sushan. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me. It's such a pleasure to be a part of this and get a chance to reflect on my journey. I was born and raised in Chicago, and at the time when I was growing up in the 80s, the people around me, there weren't really any working women in my community and in my family. And so I had a very hard time seeing what a career could look like for me. You know, I went to college, I was an engineer, I was a consultant, I worked in private equity at that time with not a lot of women, and I just couldn't see my career past 30. And so what it really took was going through a process of learning just to stay in it and to continue on it, even though I faced challenges over time. And I would say that a couple things in reflection have come up on that. I think the first thing I want to touch on is that at the beginning, it's very hard to kind of step into your career. And one thing to be focused on is to really know your worth. Negotiation is a very important point that not a lot of women focus on when they're thinking about what they want in a career and maybe what they deserve. And that's something that has come up in studies, that over time, women are very much at a disadvantage because of this lack of negotiation. So I'd stress on negotiation. I think the other thing I would stress on is that the easiest way to stay in the workforce, if that's what you're looking for, is to find something that you love doing. We often find ourselves in jobs that maybe we're doing it because it seems like the right thing to do, or it's something that the people around us respect. But if you don't love what you're doing, it'll be very easy not to stay in it. Some of my co-panelists, very, very impressive set of co-panelists, have touched on the idea that there are more or less an equal number of women who are in university and who are in early stages of their career. But we see a big fallout of women when it comes to this stage of family planning. And not all women have families, but it is a time in your life when you easily fall out. And this is really the time to make a commitment to stay in the workforce. And that takes a lot of help. We talked about the idea of support in countries where you can have easy support. It's also critical to have people around you who can give you that support. I met my husband in business school, and we never really talked about who would do what in our lives. But he made a great point when I was pregnant with our first child. He said that men and women will truly be equal when it will be okay for a man to be a stay-at-home dad. And I would love for us to unpack that statement at some point in our discussion today, because that really comes down to biases that all of us hold. When we can all put the right value on the work that happens at home in terms of childcare and also in terms of caring for elderly parents, then I think as a society, we can start laying the groundwork for men and women to truly have equal opportunities. I also want to touch upon something that I read. I graduated from business school in 2004, and soon thereafter, I read a study, also a McKinsey study, about how so many women were dropping out of the workforce from top business schools. And it touched on this idea that, as a generalization, women and girls really focus on being perfect and can't accept this lack of perfection and would rather drop out of the workforce than be able to do everything perfectly. And this is a theme that has come up so much in my professional journey, not only with that study, not only with my experiences, but also through the executive coaching I've gone through, that your good is good enough. And it's okay not to be perfect at work. It's okay not to be perfect at home. We're all just trying to do our best. And I think when we can figure that out, we can continue to just stay in it. Because the career journey is a marathon. You know, I loved hearing about Sfida's marathon journey, because it really is what we're doing in our career. And if you can stay in it, then there can be more women at the top. And maybe I'll close out my initial remarks by talking about once you are more senior in your career. And it's just in the last few years that I've started to be really at the executive level in my organization and start joining boards. And I joined a publicly traded food and beverage, the board of a publicly traded food and beverage business here in the UAE as the first woman on the board. And there's also still no women in the executive leadership team there. And I think that for us to really be in this top rank, it's about staying in it, but it's also about getting the people around us comfortable with having diversity at the table. Because I know myself that the easiest people to hire are the people who are just like you. And I'll just close out with a funny story. Early on in my career, I was building up a team in one of my functions. And at one point, some close people around me commented that I had built a team of people who looked exactly like me, who sounded exactly like me, and who thought exactly like me. And it was the most comfortable team I've ever managed, but it was the team that all thought alike, and we had no fresh or innovative ideas. And this is why we need diversity around us and in our workplace. Sorry if I'm a bit long-winded, Sushan. It's still a bit early for me.
No, I think you teed up a lot of very relevant and very highly timely factoids, which I do want to then take on and unpeel, and perhaps do it in two or three buckets. And I'm going to open up to the floor. Shamila, you talked about really, knowing your self-worth and going to the negotiation table, and I think that resonated with everybody. So let's talk about that, and also the fact that until men realize that it's okay to be a stay-home dad, that it's okay to pull your weight at home, and that there is a lot of worth in that home work that we do. Let's unpack that as the first bucket. And the second bucket is perhaps a life cycle. I think we all talked about that when a young woman joins the workforce, obviously, getting them into the right jobs despite their different environments and education, and then helping them in their early stages of their career, role modeling, the importance of role modeling there. And then later on with children, how do you keep them engaged in the workforce, even if they have to step up for a while? And then later on with aging parents as well. So sort of a life cycle. And later on, as you become more experienced, getting more access to board seats, board appointments, building teams, and then becoming role models themselves. I think let's also unpack that sort of life cycle, career life cycle for women as a second discussion point. But let's go with the first one. Knowing your self-worth and negotiating. Are women best advocates for other women, or what about the men? Should we get male champions on board as well? So I'm going to open this up. Anyone just chime in. Maybe Svida, Angeline. Tell me, what do you think of the idea of getting women to negotiate for themselves? I fully resonate with that, because I would say early on in my career, I didn't negotiate for myself. I just went with the flow, right? I was a price taker, but now, I am a price maker, right? So I guess we do evolve as we get more experience. But how can we, as women, help younger women to stand firm on the negotiating table and say, listen, this is, I know I'm doing a good job. This is what I feel I deserve. And I can share a factoid myself. I think early on in my career, I was 24, 25, and I made my first trip to a city in the Middle East. And it was during a difficult time in the Middle East. And like you, Shamila, I think I was the only woman in the room. And I think because my name could be a man, could be a woman, nobody expected a woman to walk in. And so when I walked in, I saw the collective gasp of horror in the room. And it was a tough meeting for me. And being the only woman, being the only Asian, and young at that. And I think about 10 minutes into the meeting, I realized there was a wall of disbelief, and there was a wall of sort of, I guess, if you will, they were not willing to talk to a woman. So and I had to climb that wall. And halfway through, I thought, nope, I'm worth more than this. And so I said, test me. If you don't have faith in me, test me. I'll do a merger model. I'll do a convertible bond arbitrage, parity calculation for you. But test me. And they tested me, and of course I passed. And at that point, I said, okay, I know my stuff, but if you don't think this meeting is worth having, I will leave the room. And I got up and I walked out. And they came after me and they said, come back. We're sorry. We just were not used to this. But you know what? The boss said, give me your itinerary. I gave him my itinerary. He called every other, financial institution on my itinerary to say, she's okay. She knows her stuff. And so he opened the path for me to then have much better meetings after that first initial meeting. And so early on, that gentleman was, for me, a male champion in a time and era where, women in finance and certainly women in derivative arbitrage was a rare thing. So I'm grateful that gentleman who helped. But, I understood after that he belonged to a class of gentlemen that were not used to and perhaps had these, stereotypes in their minds that had to be broken, right? So how do we break those stereotypes and how do we help women negotiate better? Sveta, you're on mute.
Yes. First of all, a lot of our cultures would actually press that down. We're not supposed to speak out, let alone negotiate. I mean, that's far. Just to speak out what we feel and express it. It's not in some culture like Japanese. They would keep it. And until now, I do still have even difficulties talking with my staff because of that. And I was like, please don't keep that to yourself. Speak it out. So that is like takes a lot of training for anyone to speak out. Sometimes I don't say like this is a girl's issues, this is a boy's issues, or men, women. But this is about culture that we're not allowed to speak out. First, we have to let the seniors to speak, and these are the ones that needs training, needs exposure. When we expose them with the possibility and tell them, look, this is a better way to express yourself, to create, to make it faster, to find agreement. And so that in my office, we do workshop for it. And the negotiation, sometimes it begins with the cultural part, breaking the cultural barrier, and then more of a Western style negotiation class workshop. And to have networking and mentoring is also very good. When we have program of workshop for women in the career, professional women workshop, there are more, what you call that in English? There are more like emotional outbursts than questions. The session of outbursts of emotions, because apparently it's just like they don't have mentors. They're not coming from a family that the women go to work and deal with people at work, and they don't have that exposure. And when they are in it, they don't know, and sometimes they blame things, and we're actually, no, it's for you to take action. It's for you to stand up. So I am a believer that to join a lot of networks, to join, to raise your hand for a mentor. Can you be my mentor? And I'll be your mentee. It's something that would take you a long miles. until now, I always have some people that is like my guiding force, like, hey, I have a question and things like that. So do always don't hesitate to ask.
Thank you,
Probably
Smita. So managing your outbox, not just managing your inbox, right? So
yes.
having a plan, being more proactive. I will share that, I started the Financial Women's Association after my second child was born. And I was aided by 10 great young women who all decided when we were young mothers that, if we leave the workforce today, who's going to help us get us back? And if we had a network to help, us keep our foot in the industry, know what's going on, and have mentor mentees like what you said, a personal board of directors that can be objective in your career progression, in your professional progression, in your personal life, etc. That would be great. So manage actively, proactively manage that. Get your circle of independent board of directors who can help you out. And have plenty of good role models and mentors. And I like what Shamila said about negotiating skills. Like one of the first things we did at the Financial Women's Association was get a professional negotiating coach to come in on the lunch and learn session to teach us how to negotiate for ourselves, teach us how to negotiate at home, negotiate at work, negotiate with clients, etc. I think those are life skills that are definitely worth cultivating. Angeline, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think I agree definitely with what Sheeta's saying, right? I think for me, it's really, getting out there as a woman leader to try and speak in as many events as possible when it comes to these topics. I'm part of EO, and I'm in two women-only EO groups as well. One of them is just really focused on how can we help empower women to grow into their own, to be able to speak out, right? Because I think in the Filipino culture, it's very reserved. I mean, even for men, to be fair, right? But I think it's really how do we encourage people to not be shy about things that they should deserve, right? So I think that's one thing that like being a mentor, being able to encourage women to speak out, and men for that matter as well, to be fair, is something that I think we actively try to do in the workplace. Like, hey, tell me what you're worth, right? Tell me, and encouraging people to recognize what they're good at and what needs to be improved, and actually that's just part of work management, to also track how well you're doing. So I think with that, people can slowly gain confidence also in their skills, and then be more from a place of confidence to speak out about, I think I'm doing well, right? Because now I understand what's expected of me, what I've been able to do, and what I bring to the table, right? So I think these are things that may not be just gender related, at least in the workplace, but it's really something that can apply for all genders, right?
Shamila, you want to chime in here?
Yeah, I'll just say a few quick things. When we talk about negotiation, it has an instant connotation to, pay. But I want to really say that this is so much more than that. When we're talking about what's your worth, I think this is about advocacy. I mean, primarily, I think everyone should understand that we are our own best advocates, and we need to guide our careers. We need to gain the skills and experience that will make us more valuable. And then we need to study the information so that we know what the right compensation should be, or at least a band should be. And negotiation sounds like such a big word, but it is as simple as asking. And that can be so hard, and you can do it in the most polite way that fits within a culture. But if we don't ask, you don't get. And it's not just asking for the right compensation, it's also asking for the right responsibility. I have been lucky enough in my career to manage large groups of people, and I understand the difficulties of leaders sometimes, of making sure that everybody gets a fair chance at a career development or a fair chance at the right compensation. So sometimes it's really just about somebody asking for that promotion or asking for to be paid correctly, for that to be recognized, and then action to be taken. And I just want to mention something else, that you are your own key advocate, but you need to build a circle of advocacy, not just in terms of people who you work for or mentors, but you need to build a peer group, and you need to build people who like working for you and who want to work for you. This pool of advocacy is what will help us all grow and succeed. And as women, we need to advocate for each other and be very careful about the competition that sometimes can arise from just a few women in the room. We need to advocate for each other.
Very well said, Shamila. I think this, circle of advocacy and I guess beyond the whole mentorship, it's also it's finding both seniors and peers who can actively advocate for you and speak up for you and support you and be a big sort of advocate for your career progression, right? So making sure that your voice is heard and other people voice up their support for you where it matters and when it matters. Should we change gears a little and talk about, I'm getting some questions about what kind of action plans and what can be practically done in our industries or in our countries to implement more gender equality, and I'm seeing that coming up in the questions. So I can kick off. I'm a big believer in data, and the data speaks for itself, and we need to start tracking the data of what our industries, our countries, our organizations do for women across the career cycle, right? Be it at the junior level, mid-career, and later on at the senior level. Collect the data and then call out the people who are not doing the right thing, right? So across the board, I work for DBS, where we have at every single level, how many men, how many women enter the workforce? How many are high potential, men versus women? Well, I shouldn't say versus men and women. And then as we get up the seniority, how do we make sure that high potential women stay on? If they don't stay on, how do we get them back? How do we create what Sveta talked about, flexible work arrangements so that they can still be engaged when they want to come back? And then actively call out where there are real gaps and have proactive work done. I mean, I represented women at the G20 Private Sector Alliance in 2020, where most of the G20 countries plus shared their country data. We all found in our own countries that the gender balance at the entry level was very healthy, often actually more women than men, as more women are now going to universities or getting higher education, etc. But they all dropped off. I mean, Sveta talked about it, Shamila talked about it, and Janine talked about it. They all tend to drop off sort of mid-career and later. And then at the top, there were countries that shone, and at the top, there were countries that did not. For Singapore, for example, in 2013, there were only 7.5% of women with board seats. Today, it's 16. We want to go to about 30 or 40. So now we call out the data. Which companies have an all-male board? What are you doing about it? There are no shortage of women that you can bring in as board members. We set up the board agenda, which had a pool of women candidates to put on boards. And so proactive action to change the data, to move it, and to name and I guess shame those who are not proactively embracing this change. So I would kick that off, and I open up to the rest of my fellow panelists to opine, please. What can be done, do you think, in your countries or your industries to shift the balance? Feel free to chime in.
Sveta, are you
No, go ahead, Angeline.
No, please go ahead.
Angeline.
That's okay.
So, Sfira, in media, for example, it's what are people in the media industry doing to advocate or in the fashion industry, or in the, what are you seeing in Indonesia, for example? What can be done to track the progression, and what more proactive steps can be done?
Well, again, you mentioned data. Data is important. So we need to keep on taking the pulse. We need to keep research. And that number of, for example, participation of women in the C-level through the public company, that data we can obtain. That is something like, I think we are now in the 13%. Which is pretty good. I mean, before we were like about 7%, about 8 years ago. And secondly, we need to see, sometimes we really need to understand what happened at that big siphoning stage. That is the one that the drop at the mid-career, the biggest drop at the mid-career. And to whatever stage of career, women in whatever stage career, when the question was asked, what are the reasons that you would drop your career at any time? They would say family. Whether that is the child, whether that is the in-law, this is women. I mean, even when the in-law is sick, it's the women. If there is no women there, then it's the spouse that will take care of the in-law and the parents. So, and these are the age of when the parents are getting into aging stage, 60, 70, 80. And so a lot of coming from home. Whereas from the office itself, actually, it is, if they can resist, if they can sustain at their career, it will be okay from our study. So to understand that, I think we need to change the policy, especially about the flexi hours. And now it's proven, and it happened for the past 2 years, is that flexi hours is really happening, and working from home with all the digital platform is as productive as working from the office. So probably looking to the future, we need to adjust our policy in this matter. The flexi hour, the flexi, the working from home versus working from the office. I myself has changed the office policy, that there are days that we all have to be in the office, and there are days that unless it is needed to be in the office, it's their choice to work from home or to work from the office. Because if you know, Jakarta has the distance of home to the office is pretty long hours to commute. And so this actually easing up. And then that's one way to get talent and to retain talents.
Yeah, the motherhood penalty, as they've call it, right? Some of the sociologists. So there's a lot of, that seems to be a lot that we can do. And I think the hybrid work environment, together with, proactive steps taken by management, senior management, to break the bias, will all be helpful. Shamila, what about in the Middle East? What are you seeing there?
Yes, in the Middle East, I think, first of all, I think that there's maybe a perception from the outside that it's a male dominant culture. And of course, you still have the gender inequalities that you have in many places, but actually it's impressive, especially in some of the Gulf countries. I'm in Dubai in the United Arab Emirates, where the government has made a commitment to have equal representation of women in the government at the senior leadership ministry level. In my own company at Shalhoub Group, we have made a huge commitment to tracking, as you mentioned, the data to understand how many women there are at each level, to look at pay parity. And although we've made a lot of progress at different mid-level managers and maybe slightly upper-level managers, we're still working on how to get more gender balance at the most senior leadership level. And we've just implemented a specific Rising Women Leaders education program and training program to help coach and guide our future key female leaders. So I think that there is a tracking of the information, and there's an acting of the information, and there's also giving people the tools that they need and training they need to succeed. I also just want to mention that in Saudi Arabia, which I think historically has not had a lot of women's rights, I have seen an incredible change in this country. I used to go quite regularly for work before the change, and I've been a number of times after the change. And I believe that Saudi will set the pace of change going forward in the GCC for what women can accomplish. So it's really incredible to see in my time here.
I think that's very well said and very encouraging feedback to hear, and that goes in some way to answer one of the questions that I'm getting from Mexico, from Nancy Levia, and she's asking, how do you implement an effective women group strategy for your organization? What's the scope for that? I don't know about an effective women group organization, but a women's group strategy. But I guess what we've all talked about was in each organization to track the data, to call out for behavior that is not right, to encourage a proactive, mentorship and advocates for women leadership, and to break the unconscious bias, right? And also, I guess, perhaps to call out in a positive way male champions who are role models in their behavior. We have found that fathers of daughters are very good advocates for young women leaders, as they understand, and maybe have more empathy for young women entering the workforce, and are more proactive in encouraging them up the career ladder. Does anyone want to answer the question? Angeline, go ahead.
Sorry, for the effective women group strategy or for the previous one? I mean, I just had a comment for the previous question, right? I think it's about advocacy and all that, but I think we're also missing part of like training. Right. So I think one of the great things is that we need to take advantage of women in positions. So I think one nice thing that they've passed here is the Safe Spaces Act in the Philippines in 2019, where it clearly outlines what is considered not acceptable and acceptable. So for example, a very base level of that is to catcall a woman in the street. That's actually a form of harassment. And I think for us, it's training people to realize that, right? Because the culture here is very machismo, right? So it's the men are very
macho.
Yes, the men are very free to say things to women that could be definitely is insulting if you don't know where the line is drawn, right? So I think the thing here is that I don't like to approach it in an angry manner, like, oh my gosh, why are you saying this terrible thing about women? When honestly, that's the behavior and modeling that they've had in their life, right? So, for example, if you've grown up in a room that's always been blue, you think that all rooms are blue, right? So I think this is a big step in making sure that we come from a space that we understand where they're coming from, right? And approach it in a manner to say that, hey, so that there's a line in the sand, and this line moves through generations, and this is where it is right now. and to just raise that awareness, right? So this is something we incorporate in all of our trainings for our bikers as well. So we've trained over 150,000 bikers, and hopefully that kind of translates to them gaining that first spark of awareness and understanding that, you know, we cannot treat women that way, because sometimes, you know, a biker could be very friendly towards a woman passenger, and that's not taken well, right? So that, I think that sense of awareness is really important for us to gain more equality in the way that we are being treated. Yeah.
Okay. I have a very interesting question here. And this comes from Vatsala Arunachalam from Malaysia. What is the most dangerous behavior or trait that you have seen derail the careers of female leaders? So we've all seen female leaders fail, I guess. We've all failed at some point in our lives. What are the dangerous, or I guess maybe not the word dangerous, what kind of behavior or trait leads to that? Could it be hubris? Could it be?
I'm happy to
Go on,
venture
Yeah, take
venture
that.
loaded question. So in my career, and perhaps there's some commonality other people might see with their own, I spent the early part of my career fighting to be recognized, to succeed, to be acknowledged in the room, Sushan, as you rightly pointed out. And so I was like a warrior. I was a very, very aggressive warrior. And then I had to transition into the phase of my career where I think it was probably, I would call it middle management, where I started leading first few people, small teams, then bigger organizations. And I drove myself so hard in the first part of my career. I thought that that was what I should be doing as a manager, that everybody who worked for me needed to keep up with me. And you know, since I was holding myself to the standard of perfection, which I'd like to talk about, because I think that as women, we spend too much time on perfection rather than just trying things and being okay to fail. That as a middle manager, I failed in my early days as a middle manager, and I needed to work very hard. And it's been a long journey for me to understand how to be an effective leader. And one of the first things that I needed to figure out was to evolve from being a certain type of an individual performer to a much more compassionate leader. And you know, sometimes when, at least for me, when I was coming up in a work world where I was trying to, you know, because of the environment it was in, I was trying to, you know, compete with the men and, you know, be an alpha in the room. I discounted and devalued the values that perhaps weren't the values that I thought were important, which are compassion, not necessarily being at the forefront, you know, letting my team and my organization shine. And I'm so glad I learned that lesson. And it took some hard failure, and it took a lot of coaching and support. But I think that that's one thing that where I see now women coming up in my organization and outside of my organization get it wrong. The idea that you need to shift and evolve as a leader to be that great leader who people love and want to work for.
So you don't have to be that alpha male in the room to be a successful leader.
And let me just add one more thing. I also really want us as a people to start evolving our view that leaders are these quintessential, you know, ENTJs, you know, Wolf of Wall Street 80s alphas. There has to be a recognition that men or women, there are different skill sets that people bring to the table. And some of the best leaders I have seen can be quiet, can not speak up, can simply get the best out of their teams and out of each other and support. So we also need to address our own biases about what leadership looks like.
Very well said. Okay, let's move on to the next question. And this is one from Australia, from Celine. And she's asking, she says, gender discrimination is often linked to politics in a company. What is the best way to prevent the powerful to make this happen and not suffer from any form of discrimination or political bias? So gender discrimination in the company, is this linked to politics in the company? And how do you prevent, the people who are in decision, making positions, prevent them from exacerbating the situation, I guess. Well, I said, I said, let the data speak for themselves and call out the behavior, name and shame. But let's get everyone else to opine. Svidhar, Angeline, Shamila, do you think gender discrimination can be linked to politics in the company? And, how do you prevent this from happening?
I mean, I think when it comes to something like that, right, it's really, it's if the top management are all maybe men. So as Shamila actually touched on before, people like to work with people that they're comfortable with, right? So I think in that sense, we need to be able to, I guess, like if you're in a lower position, you probably wouldn't be able to call it out outright. But you need to be able to show that you have what it takes to, to move up in the industry, right? So I think whether it's by making sure that the work that you're doing, right, is up to par. I guess speaking out of it, right? I mean, Shamila, that would be a good way to share it. So, how do you show that what you're doing is equally important and should be recognized by the male-dominated industries on the top?
Because the thing, because Vera Tay from Singapore is asking a similar question, and her question is, how do you call out discrimination without putting the colleague in a spot?
Yeah.
And sometimes the colleague may not know. And if they don't know, show them the data and say, look, this is pure discrimination, right? And then when they know, is how do you, I guess, mentor or get that the course correction that's needed in the organization.
Maybe I'll step in.
Yeah,
happy to step in on this one. Listen, I think it's very challenging, and at the top ranks, there are a few positions at the top ranks, and both men and women face challenges to get to those top ranks. So firstly, you have to know your worth. You have to be your own best advocate, and you have to negotiate with those to show them that you have the capability and you have the drive. The other thing is that sometimes we have to vote with our feet. And if the organization isn't ready to give you the challenges that you're ready to take, sometimes you need to seek those challenges elsewhere. And I think that fundamentally, the people who are in the position of decision to put individuals into these positions of leadership, they want success. They want their organizations to succeed. And so it's really about showing that you can be the person to succeed and having some level of trust in the system that the candidate with the best qualifications eventually will get there because they will demonstrate success. And it's not always going to be fair, but it really, it's a process, and it comes down to you knowing your worth and going somewhere where you're going to succeed.
Yeah, that's true. At the end of the day, you are your best, advocate, and you choose your own path. Here's a question from Vivi Youssef from Fashion Valley. I don't know what country this is, but her question is, what do you think of the perception that that people like to work for male leaders because women leaders are too emotional and always give excuses that they have to go home, etc.? We're all laughing at that question.
Well, first of all, I'd like to say hi to Vivi. I
Oh,
think she's in
okay.
Kuala Lumpur. I
Okay.
know her through EndeavHER.
All right.
She's a very well known member of the EndeavHER entrepreneurship
Oh,
community, and
fantastic. Hi, Vivi. Okay. Well, this is a question for any of you, any of us. Svina, you want
well,
to say something?
It does. I mean, there. If the answer is, it's not about the sexuality, male or female, but it's more of a leadership styles, and probably women. There is a study that women leaders have looking at issues more broadly and more giving more flexibility, but it does not mean that is emotional and give excuses, but that is I think the subordinate with the time will understand the leadership style of his or her boss, whether that's a female or male. And if that is a stereotype, then sometimes time would prove that stereotype is correct or incorrect. But I'm sure in a well-run company, there is also a reason why is it correct. I like to go back to that gender discrimination. I work in a male-dominated in the early of my career. That was in GE, and sometimes I feel that to get hurt, and that was like the beginning of my career, to get hurt among the male associates, I really have to work more than these boys because they have more link to the bosses. I mean, we work for a few leaders, and because they're among the men, they have the other men's room, and I'm the one that left without the men's room, and so I have to work harder, but that's okay because I understand that I need to prepare more so that I can be ready ahead of what they have been doing. I'm talking about early career. On the middle career is on the gender discrimination is again preparation makes you a better person, a better manager, better prep than the others, making it even better, and that would sort of take away the gender discrimination. I mean, it's true. I have to admit, it's true that there is gender discrimination, but then it's how we look at it, and maybe we are at the stage that is still warrior for this. Yeah. So that's my comment on the two.
Thanks, Vida. I guess, in a world of, as we said, my hybrid working, then working from home is not working, right? So whether you're at home, you've gone home, or you're at the office, I think this is actually not bad for women who have to toggle both. This hybrid work is actually a boon, I think, for women leaders. And as for being too emotional, I guess showing empathy is not a weakness, is it? And sometimes being vulnerable and daring to be vulnerable openly, I think could be a show of strength, actually. And I guess we have to break this unconscious bias that, only the alpha male type of leadership is the right kind of leadership. In a world ravaged with war, sometimes having empathy and showing vulnerability is a show of strength. Okay, let's go to the next question. And this is from Afiza Idris from Malaysia. How much of your time are you spending on development of your team's skills during transition from pandemic to endemic, especially for your female employees? So how much time are you spending on the development of your team's skills during this transition? It's an interesting question. I guess all of us are transiting, right? Some of us more so than others. I think the UAE has already transited to endemic. Other countries are in the process. Singapore is definitely in the process. I mean, I can kick off. I think we realized that running meetings in a hybrid way is very different from everybody in a room. And very often, if people tend to be more quiet, then they could disappear completely if your meetings are hybrid or virtual. And so making it part of the ritual, at least for meetings, to hear different voices in the room, having people do simple things like switch on your video, at least when you start the call, so we know who's on and who's not. And we have something called a meeting mojo, the meeting owner, MOJO, meeting owner, joyful observer, and making sure that the joyful observer, who's the person that critiques the meeting, is a virtual attendee, who can then make sure that the virtual attendees are all engaged in the conversation, and their voices are heard. And doing a lot more team building exercises, virtual lunches, virtual drinks, virtual exercises, virtual yoga, whatever it is, but making sure that people all feel engaged and continue with the skills training as well. But can I hear from the rest of you? Has the pandemic changed the way you're developing your teams, developing skills within your teams?
I can step in for a moment. I wouldn't say that the pandemic has changed the development or the skill set. Rather, it's accelerated it. What the pandemic has shown us in our industry and in our part of the world is the absolute need to be committed to new ways of doing business. And for us, this really means digital commerce, that means digital communication, and it means, as you've mentioned, these new ways of working. And so what's been critical for the people in our organization, men and women, is to make sure that people understand and are comfortable with driving the new ways of engaging our consumer and of doing business. And in terms of the time spent on development, it's critical, pandemic, endemic, any time that organizations and we as women focus on developing the teams around us, because it's through this continual learning that organizations and teams get better. So it has to be a lifelong commitment to that learning. I just want to also mention very quickly, back to Vivi's comment about maybe sometimes there's this negative bias about working for a woman. Just like we count on our managers and leaders to give us feedback and to get better, as leaders and managers, we also need your feedback. We need to know how we can get better at being managers and leaders. And it's not something that just is obvious. It's a continuous learning process. So please, in a kind, considerate, constructive way, go try to share with the people who you work with how they can get better. And if you don't feel comfortable one-to-one, talk to your organization about anonymous 360 feedback or other forms of communication.
Indeed, yeah. I think giving constructive, often sometimes negative feedback is the toughest thing to do. But if we can do that in a safe environment, make it psychologically safe to speak up and to discuss head on the tough things, and to address the tough issues head on. I think companies can make it safe for people to do so, whether it's anonymous 360s or at DBS we have something called the T Sprint, where we just devote a day for groups that work together to really give each other this feedback and actually force people to give, constructive or negative feedback on each other, and making it, psychologically safe to do so, and to break down the barriers to communicating. I want to take this question from Sharifa Laila Faruiz El Idros from Malaysia. And she says, in starting on my own as a woman, the challenge sometimes can be when talking to potential stakeholders who are mostly male, who either seem disinterested or don't take our ideas or our ambitions seriously. How do you present or position yourselves when encountering such situations? Sounds like a female founder, female entrepreneur trying to present her ideas to male investors. I think something you're all familiar with.
So I mean, maybe just to chime in here, right? So I think one thing to know is that there are going to be a lot of people who will not take your ideas seriously, especially if you're starting out as a founder in a startup, right? So for me, it's really don't take it to heart that they're male and they're discriminating me because I'm a female. I don't think that's the case. Sometimes it is, but I don't think it's constructive to think that way, right? Because ultimately, most of the investors at this point are still male, unfortunately, right? So, but I believe that they will have the same reaction to any guy who's presenting the same idea, right? So I think it's having that confidence that it's not because you're female and that they are not interested in your idea because of that. Take it as, this, you need to find out what is it that they might have concerns about, get feedback about what their thoughts are about your idea and ambition, and then work from there, right? Because what I think if you look at if you listen to podcasts of very successful businesses, so I would recommend listening to this podcast called Acquired, right? So Acquired is a podcast that basically talks about how companies who got listed, what is their story from start to end. There are other podcasts like this, like Hustle Share in the Philippines, right? They tell you about the struggles that founders go through in order to get to where they are today. So I think when you look at even, let's say, a company like Uber, right? Nobody believed that Uber was going to work at the start. Like, why would I get into a car with a strange person? So there are a lot of things that go through, especially when at the start, when something is which is you're throwing an idea out there that is challenging the status quo. Expect people not to be interested. Expect people to tell you it's not going to work. But find out why they're saying it and find out how can you improve on your idea. How can you make this better? How can you make this more interesting for them in order to do what you're trying to do, right? So I think that's really the more important thing about being a founder is get used to people telling you can't do it and figuring out how can you do it better.
That's good. Sveta, you mentor a lot of young women entrepreneurs who probably have the same challenges as well. What do you tell them?
Yeah, it is about perseverance and understanding that rejection is just the beginning of a journey, that to keep persevere, to train, to learn, and to improve the pitch. We have a lot of after passing the LSP, then we do train them a lot in the presentation, in crafting the pitches and the stories, so that it creates, it sort of prepare like what would be in the minds of the person in front, the panelist, and that kind of thing. Then it probably the answer is join EndeavHER. Join EndeavHER.
I say that actually, Sveta.
Scale up.
Has a great network to support.
Yes, and take the Scale Up Clinic. EndeavHER has Scale Up Clinic, and that is the best way to train yourself to for the pitching, for the pitches, for the cases, for the presentation, even for the business itself. It gives more focus to the business.
Okay, thank you all. The questions are coming in thick and fast, and we have about 10 or 11 minutes left, so I might bunch up some of them. But I want to take one from Yasmin Baran from Turkey. Wow, we have someone from Turkey. What's one thing that you would correct from how women advocacy or feminism are perceived or described? So is there anything that you would change in how feminism or advocacy is described or perceived? It's not an easy question, I know. And my normally very, active panel.
I think women advocacy, again, it evolves from time to time. It's change from Gloria Steinem, from, I don't know if even Yasmin would know Gloria Steinem. I mean, my time is like Gloria Steinem is the hero of the women advocacy. It's totally different. It's a hardcore that we need to fight for our femininity and for our roles in the men's world. But now it's the opposite. We need to use our women power that is different than the male skill set, and that would create a more balance, especially in the era of disruptive. Probably women are more taskmaster than male. So I would not say like, is there anything to correct, but it's a journey.
I like that, Srida. The fact that it has evolved, right? That's the
Yeah.
evolution of women advocacy and an evolution of feminism, which was very different in the 80s and the 90s, in this new digital age where empathy, diversity in a digital world, Web 3.0, decentralized world, women advocacy has to change as the world evolves. And as the world becomes more polarized, with war, with trade disputes, and East versus West, etc. I think women play a strong role in building these bridges with empathy, understanding, and communication. Right? Do Angeline and Shamila want to chime in here? Shamila, go ahead.
Yes, I think what I would say is that there's no right answer or perfect answer. I mean, we're half the population, so sometimes when someone says, okay, speak on behalf of women advocacy, I mean, that's a very broad topic because there are so many women out there. So I would say that there's no right answer. It's really just about doing to the best that you can do. And I really feel that it's not a topic that somehow is against men. It has to be a collective solution. It has to be that we're trying to create a better world for women and for men, to have that balance, to have that diversity of thought, so that it's not necessarily the expense of one or the other.
Indeed. Okay, another question here from Indonesia. What are the few empowering traits or values that can be included, I guess, inculcated and amplified in industries and with entrepreneurs? So what are the empowering traits or values? It's quite a broad question. But those of you here who are entrepreneurs, who mentor entrepreneurs, I'm hearing, resilience, dare to fail fast, pick yourself up, don't worry, people close the door on you. Maybe here's a good time before we close to maybe share some failure stories or times where we also encountered closed doors. How did we overcome that and move on? And I guess resilience being an important value. Also, I guess knowing when to step back, take one step back to take two steps forward. I mean, I'll share. I've taken that step in my life many times where in my careers are never straight line up. It's ups and downs. It could be market driven, it could be personal life driven, whatever, right? Life happens. But I know that I have in my career path often taken one step back, and then as a result of that taken two steps forward. So I think an ability to see the big picture, the knowing when to step back, knowing when to push forward, and being your own strongest advocate. But I'd like to open the floor to any of the three of you on sharing what are the few empowering traits or values and what can we learn.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I could start. I think there's, in terms of like for entrepreneurship, right? As with life, I think being an entrepreneur has taught me a lot about life, and maybe being a mom has taught me a lot about life because. In life, you face a lot of failures, right? We face a lot of failures in Angkas, right? As I said, we've been shut down 3 times. But really, I think it's about how do you deal with the failure, right? Do you give up and say, okay, I'm done, I'm going to do something else? Like I always tell my friends, I want to sell toilet bowls. It's like, that's something that's non-controversial.
private roles, if you say. Yeah, they were in very hot demand last year and 2 years later.
But I mean, I think one is that you need to know yourself. You need to be authentic to yourself. You need to know why you're doing what you're doing, and then you also need to understand where other people are coming from, right? So I think that's one thing to do to change mindsets, which is what we had to face here in the Philippines with our business. I think the other thing is that don't try to run away from problems, right? So I think in life, there's always going to be problems. I talk to people in any industry, they'll always have their own issues, right? And I think it's not about making sure you have no problems. It's about knowing that there will be problems and how can you face these problems? How do you get better at it, right? So think about it like playing a game, right? You play a game and you die. You don't say, I'm going to shut down the game and not do it again. You're going to say, okay, now I know that there's a hole there and I have to like jump over that hole. And you try
Talking like a true gamer.
Yeah, because that's the way to do it, right? You know what the problem is, and then how do you get past this problem? So being a problem solver is really really very important. And I think also embrace, like I know here we're talking about women and men, but I think if as a woman, it's not that I'm going to cry and go home because I'm a woman. I'm more in touch with my feelings, and for me, it's innate for me to want to take care of people. And I think that's also been very. I want to take care of people. I want to take care of the environment, and that's also helped us with where we are today. Because if I make sure that we take care of all our stakeholders, right? Our customers, our drivers, we care about them. They're our community, and I think that's really set us apart from the competition where they just treat drivers as a commodity and like make money for us. You don't, and that's it, right? So I think that's where being unafraid to be a female leader and embrace your strengths can also play into being successful. Yeah,
I think you said a few great points, Angeline, which is, showing that you care and the importance of caring, whether it's for the environment, the community, your customers, has been a strong differentiator, right? And actually a strength, not a weakness. I talked about resilience. You talked about authenticity, also the practicalities of facing up to problems and trying to solve them. And if you can't solve them on your own, get help, right? Do Sveta or Sharmila want to chime in here?
All the above, and passion. I mean, I think the biggest driver for me is doing things that I'm very passionate about, and quick to accept mistake, because if we have a mistake and we keep and keep drifting away from accepting that is a mistake, that is a failure. But if we accept that is a mistake and then analyze it and let it go, that is a mistake, and how to do it better, or to drop it, or to do it better, that is something that we need to make the decision fast. Perseverance we talked about, and be a good listener. Probably that's my additional.
Very very wise indeed. Shamila? I think
For yourself. Can you hear me?
Yeah, now we can. Great. Go ahead.
Okay. I would say that passion and resilience, which have been said, those are great attributes. I would add compassion for yourself and compassion for others around you. This is a quality I myself am trying to work on.
Wonderful. So some great, I get some great ending factoids there: passion and compassion, resilience, authenticity, proactivity, and humility. Right, all great traits for great empowering entrepreneurs. And with that, I've got 1 more minute, and all that there is left for me to do is to thank all of you wonderful women leaders on today's panel with EndeavHER, and hopefully we've given our listeners some food for thought. I, for one, want to thank all of you for spending this morning with us. Thank you all for waking up early, especially Shamila in Dubai. And thank you to all the global questions for submitting your questions to us and joining us this morning. I've learned a lot. I've made some new friends, I hope. We look forward to being together again. Thank you to my panel. And I believe we've got the EndeavHER group to come back to close up for us. Vera? Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sushan, Sharmila, Angeline, and also Vida. Before we go, is it possible for us to just take a group screenshot? I'll get Saida to queue. Okay, so 1, 2. And also one, just in conjunction with International Women's Day, for one, like break to bias. If everyone's okay with doing that pose. Okay, 1, 2. Okay. Thank you so much, everyone. I think it's been such an insightful session. If there's a few key takeaways that I've taken from the session today, it's that you are your own advocate, but you need to build your own pool of advocacy to help you grow and succeed. And we need to be an advocate for each other. And sometimes showing empathy and vulnerability is not a weakness. In life, you face a lot of failures, but it's about how you deal with failures. Be authentic to yourself. If you can't solve it, get help. We would also like to thank our partners for supporting us towards elevating and helping these high-impact female entrepreneurs, as well as providing a platform for women to amplify their voices. Stay tuned for our upcoming sessions. Follow our social media pages for more info and next updates. And if you have any feedback or if you have any suggestions on topics we should focus in the future, feel free to scan the QR code on the screen and let us know. I hope you've gained great insights throughout the session. Till next time, stay safe, stay healthy, and have a great weekend, everybody. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.